The rain fell hard on the old marketplace, washing the dirt into small streams that ran between broken stones. 3 alien widows walked slowly, their clothes thin, their children clinging to their sides. Their eyes carried the weight of hunger, and their voices carried the weight of desperation. They had been walking from door to door since sunrise, but every answer was the same. At the first bakery, they asked the owner for work. They promised to clean, to sweep, to wash dishes. The man shook his head. "Go away, bad luck follows you," he said coldly. He slammed the door, and the smell of warm bread was lost to them as the shutters closed. At the second shop, a widow begged, her hands shaking. "Please, I will do anything, my children are hungry." The shopkeeper spat on the ground and told them to leave. The fro. Children pressed their faces into their mother's arms, afraid of the harsh words. They walked away, their feet heavy. At the third stall, laughter greeted them. A group of young workers pointed at the widows, mocking their worn-out clothes and broken shoes. "Cursed women," one said. "No wonder no one will hire you." The laughter stung worse than the rain. The widows pulled their shawls tighter, holding back tears. They would not cry in front of strangers. Everywhere they went, doors closed, shutters dropped, and voices turned sharp. It was as if the whole marketplace had already decided their fate. No one wanted them. No one trusted them. No one cared. Their husbands had died in the war, and with their death, the respect once given to their families vanished too. Now they were only seen as a burden, a curse, a shadow no one wanted to touch. By midday, the widows found themselves sitting under a broken roof for shelter. The rain dripped through holes, soaking their shoulders. Their children shivered, clutching each other for warmth. One of the women whispered, "Maybe we should stop. Maybe no one will ever help us." Her voice was thin, trembling with exhaustion. But another widow shook her head. "We cannot stop. Our children cannot starve." She looked at her little boy, his lips pale from hunger. "If we give up now, then what future do they have?" Her words carried strength, but her eyes carried fear. She knew that strength alone would not fill an empty stomach. The third widow, the youngest of the 3, tried to smile for her daughter. She brushed wet hair from the girl's face and said softly, "We will find someone. One door must open. One heart must listen." But even she felt the weight of doubt pressing down. The rain did not stop, and the streets only grew colder. The widows rose again, step by step. They walked through alleys, where shadows stretched long. They knocked on another door and another. Each time the answer was no. Each time rejection felt sharper, heavier, more final. By evening their hands were numb, their throats dry. Their children had not eaten since yesterday. The youngest child began to cry, the sound weak and tired. The widows gathered close, trying to comfort the little one. Their hearts ached, not because of the rejection, but because they could not protect their children from this pain. The oldest widow whispered a prayer under her breath, a prayer for mercy, a prayer for hope. As the sky darkened, the streets emptied. Lights shone from windows, but none for them. They had walked the whole day, and still no door had opened. The widows stood together in silence, listening to the soft rain. Their hope felt thinner than the air around them. But in the shadows of the marketplace, someone had been watching. A human worker, tired from his own long day, had stayed behind to clean the storeroom of a workshop. His hands were rough, his clothes simple, but his eyes were sharp. He had seen the widows knocked back, seen the laughter, seen the cruelty. He had heard the words thrown at them like stones. For hours, he had stayed silent, watching from the corner of the street. He did not know why he could not walk away. He only knew that something in their faces struck him, something no one else seemed to notice. It was not weakness. It was not curse. It was strength hidden under sorrow, dignity hidden under misery. The human wiped rain from his brow, his heart heavy. He thought of his own mother, long gone, and how she too had begged once long ago when times were hard. He thought of the shame of being turned away, the sting of rejection, the way it burned deep in the soul. And he thought of the children, their small hands clutching at thin shawls, their eyes wide with hunger. The widows did not see him yet. They stood together, heads bowed, whispering their last prayers into the cold night air. They did not know that their story was about to change. They did not know that a human heart was about to open when every alien door had closed, and in that moment as thunder rolled across the sky, destiny began to move. The human's name was Daniel. He was not rich, not powerful, not someone others noticed in the crowd. He was just a worker, a man who stayed late to clean machines and sweep the dust from the corners of the shop. His life was quiet, but his eyes missed nothing. And that night, as the rain beat down on the marketplace, those eyes could not look away from the 3 alien widows and their children. For hours he had seen them move from door to door. He had watched as shutters slammed in their faces, as voices grew sharp and cruel as laughter followed them down the streets. He saw the way the children clung to their mothers, too tired to cry anymore. He saw the way the widows straightened their backs after every rejection, as if they refused to break even when the world pushed them down. Daniel felt something stir in him. It was not pity. It was something deeper, heavier. It was a memory, a wound that never fully healed. Years ago, when he was still a boy, his own family had begged for help after the factory fire took his father's life. His mother had knocked on doors just as these women did. And like them, she had been turned away again and again. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, the shame of being called unwanted. That memory returned now like a ghost, and it would not let him stay silent. He leaned against the post of the shop, his rough hands gripping the wood. He asked himself, why should he care? These were not his people. Their war was not his war. Their husbands had not fought beside his father. Their children were strangers. Yet when he looked at them, he saw himself, he saw his mother, he saw his past. The widows gathered beneath the broken roof, trying to shield their children from the storm. Their voices were low, whispers carried away by the rain. Daniel could not hear the words, but he could see their faces, tired and hopeless. The youngest widow tried to smile at her daughter, but her lips trembled. The oldest leaned, her head against the wall, whispering prayers into the night. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to step forward, but his feet refused. Fear held him back. What would people say if a human helped alien widows? Already, humans were not trusted in this city. Already, they were seen as outsiders. If he gave them aid, he would be mocked, cursed, maybe even attacked. His job could be taken, his place in the market lost, but then lightning flashed across the sky, and for a moment he saw the widows clearly. He saw their children, soaked and shivering, huddled together like little birds in the storm. Something inside him broke. He could not stand there any longer. Not when he knew the taste of hunger, not when he knew the weight of despair. He stepped out from the shadows, his boots splashing in the rain. The sound made the widows look up sharply. Their eyes widened, filled with fear. They thought another, cruel voice was coming. Another rejection, another insult. One of the children whimpered and clung tighter to his mother's arm. Daniel stopped a few steps away. His heart pounded. His mouth felt dry. For a moment, he almost turned back. But then he forced the words out, slow and steady. I saw you today, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I saw what they did to you. The widows stared, confused, waiting for the rest, waiting for the blow. Daniel took a deep breath. I don't have much. I'm just a worker, but if you need help, I can give you some. The rain fell harder, but for the widows, time seemed to freeze. They could not believe what they had heard. Was this human mocking them? Was this a trick? Their own people had turned them away. Why would a human, someone who owed them nothing, step forward now? The oldest widow narrowed her eyes, her voice wary. Why would you help us? She asked. Her tone was sharp, not out of anger, but out of fear. Too many promises had been broken, too many lies told. Daniel met her gaze. His eyes were steady. Because once, someone helped my family when no one else would. And because no one deserves to be left like this. Not you, not your children. His voice cracked with honesty. The widows exchanged glances. They did not know what to say. Their hearts wanted to believe him, but their wounds whispered caution. The youngest widow pulled her daughter close, whispering, softly, What if it is a trap? The middle widow shook her head. His eyes do not lie, she said quietly. Daniel felt the weight of their silence. He knew trust was not given easily. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small bundle of bread he had saved from his shift. It was not much, but he held it out, letting the rain soak the cloth. Take it, he said. It is yours? The children looked at the bread with wide eyes, hunger plain on their faces. The oldest widow hesitated only a moment before taking it. Her hands shook as she broke the bread into pieces, giving each child a share. The little ones ate quickly, crumbs sticking to their wet lips. For the first time that day, their eyes brightened. Daniel watched quietly, relief washing over him. He had done something small, but to them, it was everything. The widow's suspicion did not vanish, but in their eyes, he saw something change. A spark, fragile but real. The rain still fell. The night was still cold, but now the widows were not alone. A human had stepped forward, and though none of them knew it yet, this small act would be the first step into a story that would shake the hearts of many. The rain slowed to a soft drizzle, but the streets were still empty. The widows sat close with their children, the small bundle of bread already gone. They were grateful for the human's kindness, yet their hearts were still guarded. Too many times they had been fooled by empty words. Too many times they had been offered help only to be betrayed. Daniel stood a few steps away, the rain dripping. From his shoulders he had given them food, but he knew food for one night was not enough. Hunger would return tomorrow. Despair would return with it. He felt the weight of the choice pressing on him. His life was already hard, his pay small, his time short. Yet something inside him whispered that if he walked away now, he would never forgive himself. He took a slow step closer. The widows tensed, their eyes sharp and uncertain. The children pressed against their mothers. Daniel raised his hands gently, showing he meant no harm. Listen, he said, his voice calm. I cannot give you riches. I cannot give you a palace, but I can give you work. The words hung in the air like lightning. The widows stared at him in silence, unable to believe what they had heard. Work, real work, not pity, not crumbs, but something that could restore their dignity. The oldest widow's voice was low, almost broken. You would give us work, she asked. Her tone carried both suspicion and fragile hope. Daniel nodded. I work at a workshop down the street, he explained. Machines break, floors need cleaning, tools must be sorted. It is hard work, but it is honest work. If you are willing, I will speak to the owner. He does not care who does the jobs as long as they are done. The middle widow shook her head, disbelief clear in her eyes. Why? Why would you risk this for us? She asked. You know what people say about us. You saw how they treat us. Why step forward when no one else would? Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought of his mother again, of nights when no one opened their doors. He thought of the way kindness had saved him once. Because I know what it feels like to beg and be refused, he answered. Because I will not let children starve when I can help. That is reason enough. The youngest widow clutched her daughter closer, her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. But if we fail, if we are turned away again, she whispered. What then? Daniel met her gaze, his voice firm. Then you will not fail alone, he said. I will stand beside you. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The widows looked at one another, doubt battling. With hope, they had lost so much, trusted so little. Could they truly believe this human? And yet in his voice, there was no trick, no lie, only steady truth. The oldest widow finally spoke, her voice steady, but soft. If you give us this chance, we will not waste it. We will work harder than anyone. We will show them we are not cursed, we are not weak. Daniel nodded slowly. His chest felt lighter, though his mind still carried worry. He knew what people would say. He knew whispers would spread. Some would laugh at him. Others would hate him. But in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered were the hungry, children now sleeping against their mothers, What mattered was that these women, broken by rejection, had a chance to rise again. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small coin pouch. It was nearly empty, but he pressed it into the oldest widow's hand. She tried to refuse, shaking her head, but Daniel closed her fingers around it. "Tomorrow, you will need strength," he said. "Buy food, buy bread. Do not let the children go hungry tonight." The widow's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow this time, but of something else, something they had not felt in so long. Gratitude mixed with the faintest spark of trust. The youngest whispered, "Why you? Why not one of our own people?" Daniel looked at the dark streets, the closed doors, the shuttered windows. He gave a bitter smile. "Because sometimes the ones you expect to help never do, and sometimes hope comes from a place you least expect." The widows said nothing, but their silence was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with something fragile but alive, a possibility, a chance, a beginning. Daniel took a step back. "Rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow I will return at sunrise. I will take you to the workshop. From there, we will see what doors open." The rain had stopped now, and the clouds broke apart to reveal a pale silver moon. Its light fell across the widows and their children, making their tired faces glow softly in the night. For the first time in months, the night did not feel like a prison. It felt like a promise. As Daniel walked away, his boots echoing on the hay. Stones. The widows watched him go. Their hearts still carried scars, still carried doubts, but also carried something new. The first offer had been made, and with it, the first spark of hope. What none of them knew was that this offer would not only change their lives, it would shake the entire town. It would test courage, loyalty, and the meaning of humanity itself. And it had all begun with a human who stayed late, and 3 widows who refused to stop knocking on doors. The sun rose weakly over the marketplace, casting pale light across wet cobblestones. The rain from the night before left puddles that reflected the sky. The widows woke early, their children still curled against them. Their eyes were swollen from lack of sleep, but something had changed. It was not much, but it was enough to carry them forward. Hope. They had eaten what little Daniel gave them, and for the first time in many days their children had gone to bed with food in their stomachs. The youngest widow whispered to the others, "Do you think he will return?" The oldest shook her head slowly. Men promise many things in the dark, but the morning shows truth. Still, a small part of her wanted to believe. As the first stalls opened, voices filled the streets again. Merchants arranged their goods, customers bargained loudly, and life returned to its usual noise. Yet the widows felt the stares. They always felt them. The whispers followed them like shadows. "Cursed women," some muttered. "Why are they still here?" The children pressed close to their mothers, as if the cruel words could turn to stones at any moment. Then, through the morning crowd, they saw him. Daniel walked toward them with steady steps. His clothes were still plain, his hair damp from the mist, but his presence made the widows rise to their feet. He had come back. He had kept his word. "You are ready?" Daniel asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes searched theirs, looking for doubt, looking for fear. The oldest widow nodded, her voice firm despite the tremble in her hands. "We are ready. We will not waste this chance." Daniel led them through the winding streets until they reached the edge of the marketplace, where the workshop stood. It was an old building, its walls stained with soot, the sound of tools clanging echoing from inside. This was no place of luxury, but it was a place of work. The widows hesitated at the door. Their hearts pounded, not from fear of labor, but from fear of rejection. What if the owner saw them and threw them out? What if Daniel's promise could not protect them? Sensing their fear, Daniel turned. "Do not be afraid," he said. "This work is not theirs to decide. It is mine. I asked for help yesterday, and the master agreed. He does not care who does the cleaning, only that it is done." The widows exchanged glances, their shoulders straightened, and they followed him inside. The air was thick with the smell of oil and iron. Machines stood like giants in the dim light. Men shouted orders. Sparks flew as metal struck metal. The noise was overwhelming, but it was also alive. The widow's children held tightly to their mother's arms, staring, wide-eyed at the strange world. Daniel showed them a corner stacked with broken tools. "Start here," he said gently. "Sort them, clean them, place them back where they belong. It is simple, but it matters." The widows set to work at once. Their hands were tired, but they did not complain. They scrubbed the dirt from handles, polished metal until it shone, and stacked the tools in neat rows. Every movement carried both desperation and determination. Their children sat nearby, watching quietly, sometimes passing cloths to help. Hours passed, and the widows did not rest. They worked until sweat soaked through their thin clothes, until their fingers were raw. Daniel watched them from across the room. Pride growing in his chest, he had seen many workers, but few with such fire in their eyes. They did not work for pay alone. They worked as if they were fighting for life itself. By midday, the corner that had been covered in dust now looked clean and ordered. Even the workers passing by stopped to look. Some muttered, "So the cursed women found a place here." Others sneered. The human must have lost his mind, bringing them in. But a few paused in silence, watching the widow's steady hands, their quiet strength. When the master of the workshop came to inspect, his face was hard and unreadable. He glanced at Daniel, then at the widows. He looked at the cleaned corner, the stacked tools, and grunted, "Good. If they keep this up, they can stay." Without another word, he walked away. The widows let out a breath they had been holding all morning. Relief washed over them. The youngest whispered, "We are safe, at least for today." Daniel smiled faintly. "Not just today," he said. "As long as you work like this, no one can take it from you." The children laughed softly for the first time in many weeks. Their laughter echoed through the workshop, cutting through the noise of metal and fire. It was a sound no one could ignore, a sound that made even the hardest worker pause and glance over. But outside, whispers had already begun to spread. Word traveled fast in the market. The cursed widows had found work, and a human had been the one to give it. Some called it foolish, some called it dangerous, others called it betrayal. Daniel knew the storm was coming. He could feel it in the way eyes followed them when they left the workshop that evening. He could hear it in the sharp laughter of merchants who muttered behind his back. Yet when he saw the widows carrying bread they had earned with their own hands, when he saw their children eat without fear, he knew he would not regret it, for the widows, it was more than food. It was more than coins, it was dignity. It was proof that they were not broken, not cursed, not forgotten. They had been given a chance, and they had seized it with both hands. That night, as they sat together, with warm bread and weary smiles, the oldest widow whispered, "It was only one door, but it opened." Daniel looked at them, his voice quiet but strong. Sometimes one door is all it takes to change everything. But in the darkness beyond the marketplace, others were watching too, and not everyone welcomed this change. The marketplace was never silent, even at night. Voices lingered like echoes, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. By the second day of work, the widows had already become the subject of every whisper. No one could believe it. The cursed women who had been turned away from every door now walked with bread in their baskets and hope in their eyes. "Did you hear?" one merchant muttered to another. "They are working in the human's shop." The other sneered, "A human's kindness, what foolishness, it will not last." Children who once mocked the widows now stared with curious eyes. Some pointed, some laughed, but others were silent, confused by the change. For so long, the widows had been seen as broken shadows. Now they were different. They carried themselves straighter, spoke a little louder, and no longer begged. But not everyone was pleased. Envy grew quickly in the cracks of the market. A group of alien workers muttered among themselves, "If they take our work, what will be left for us? They bring bad luck, and now the human is bringing them inside." Their words were sharp, filled with bitterness. The idea that widows could rise again unsettled them. Inside the workshop, the widows worked harder than ever. They scrubbed, polished, and repaired with quiet determination. Every nail they hammered, every floor they swept, every tool they cleaned carried a silent message. They were not worthless. They would prove it. Their children watched with pride. sometimes carrying small buckets or holding cloths, eager to help. Daniel saw the change too. He noticed the light in their eyes, the way the children laughed more often. He noticed how even the smallest coin earned by honest work meant more to them than gold. It was not just survival, it was dignity. He felt proud, though he also felt the weight of many eyes on him. He knew the whispers. He could hear them even when people thought he wasn't listening. That evening, as Daniel walked home, a man blocked his path. His face was twisted with anger. "Why do you waste your time on them?" he demanded. "Those women are cursed, they bring ruin. Do you want them to bring it to you as well?" Daniel stood his ground. "They are not cursed," he said firmly. "They are mothers, workers, survivors. If you cannot see that, then it is your blindness, not theirs." The man spat on the ground and stormed away, muttering threats under his breath. Daniel felt the tension rise in the air. He knew it was only the beginning. The widows felt it too. When they walked through the streets, some people moved aside in silence. Others glared openly. A few threw small stones, though none hit their mark. The children flinched, but the mothers held their heads high, refusing to bow again. The youngest widow whispered one night as they huddled together, "Do you think this will last? Do you think the world will allow us to keep this small piece of peace?" The oldest shook her head slowly. "Peace is never given. It is taken, held, and defended. If we want this to last, we must be ready to fight for it." Daniel noticed the pressure on their shoulders. He tried to ease it in small ways, bringing extra bread when he could, offering his coat when the nights grew colder. He spoke to the master of the workshop to make sure the widows would not be dismissed because of gossip. The master grunted, but agreed. He cared more for clean tools than for rumors. Still, the whispers grew sharper. More and more voices questioned Daniel's loyalty. Some called him foolish, others called him dangerous. Why stand with them, they asked. Why risk everything for widows no one wants? But Daniel did not bend. He had seen too much hunger, too much cruelty. He could not be silent now. His voice, though calm, was like iron when he said, "If no one else will stand with them, then I will." The widows heard these words and their hearts trembled. No one had ever spoken for them like that, not even their own kind. In the quiet of the night, they whispered prayers of thanks, though. Fear still clung to them. For the children, life began to change. They played outside without begging for scraps. They smiled more often. Their laughter returned to the streets. People noticed. Some softened at the sight, unable to call them cursed when they looked so alive. Others hardened further, refusing to accept that change was possible. And so, the marketplace split. Some saw hope in the widow's rise, some saw danger. It was only a matter of time before that tension broke into something more. Late one evening, Daniel found himself standing alone in the workshop. The widows had gone home and the place was silent. He thought of the path he had chosen. He thought of the storm gathering around them. He did not know how far it would go, but he knew one thing with certainty. He would not abandon them, not now, not ever. Far away, in the alleys where shadows moved like snakes, angry voices gathered. "We cannot let this continue," one said. "If we allow them to rise, what message does it send? We must remind them of their place." The night grew colder, and though the widows slept with bread in their hands, the world outside was already sharpening its claws. The whispers had become louder, and soon whispers would turn into shouts, and shouts would turn into something far more dangerous. The tension in the marketplace had grown heavy. It was like a storm that everyone could feel but no one wanted to name. The widows worked each day at the workshop, their children sitting close. Their hands never stopped. Their backs never bent in defeat. Yet around them eyes grew sharper, whispers turned darker. Daniel noticed it with every step he took. Some men nodded to him with silent respect, but others spat near his boots. The more the widows proved their worth, the more envy and anger spread. The market was no longer a place of trade alone. It had become a stage where hatred waited for a chance to strike. That chance came one night. The workshop had closed. The streets were nearly empty. The widows walked together with their children, carrying bread they had earned with their own hands. Their faces were tired but proud. Suddenly, shadows slipped from the alleys. A group of men surrounded them. The oldest widow pulled her children behind her. Her heart raced. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The leader stepped forward, his sneer cruel. "We want you gone," he said. "You do not belong here. You are cursed, and now you bring your curse to our work. Leave, or we will make you leave." The widows held their ground. Fear burned in their eyes, but so did defiance. They had been rejected before, insulted before. But this was different. This was open threat. The children clung tighter, their small bodies shaking at that moment. Footsteps echoed from the other end of the street. Daniel appeared, carrying his own bundle from the shop. His eyes narrowed when he saw the crowd. He dropped the bundle and strode forward. His voice cut through the night like steel. "Enough," he said. The men turned, their laughter mocking. "Look, the human protector," one jeered. "Do you plan to save them with your broom and your pity?" Daniel did not flinch. He stepped between the widows and the mob, his shoulders squared, his voice steady. "You will not touch them." The leader spat. "They are cursed, and you defend them. Why?" Daniel's jaw tightened. His memories flashed. His mother begging, his family shamed. "Because no one else would," he said firmly. "Because they deserve the chance every worker deserves. They are not your enemies. They are not your burden. They are people, and I will not let you harm them." "The boy," mob growled, anger flaring. One man stepped forward, raising a hand as if to strike. In that instant, Daniel grabbed his wrist and pushed him back. The man stumbled, shocked. He had not expected resistance. The street grew silent. The widows gasped. The children held their breath. The mob looked at Daniel, and for the first time, they saw not just a worker, not just a human, but someone who stood unshaken against them. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Do you think you can stop us alone?" Daniel's voice was calm, but every word struck like a hammer. "If I must, I will, but you will have to go through me first." The tension crackled like fire. The mob shifted, uncertain. They had expected fear, not defiance. They had expected silence, not courage. Their anger battled with hesitation, and in that hesitation, something changed. From the windows above, faces appeared. People had heard the noise. Neighbors leaned out, some whispering, some watching. The sight of eyes on them made the mob hesitate further. What had been planned as quiet violence was no longer hidden. The leader cursed under his breath. He glared at Daniel, then spat on the ground. "This is not over," he growled. With a sharp motion, he signaled his men. Slowly, reluctantly, they slipped back into the alleys, leaving the widows untouched. The widows exhaled as if a great weight had been lifted. Their children burst into tears, clinging to them. Daniel turned, his face still tense. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The oldest shook her head. "No, but we were close." The youngest widow whispered, "Why do you risk so much for us? You could be hurt. You could be ruined." Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft but firm. "Because what is right is worth the risk. If we bow to fear, then we are no better than those who close their doors." The widows stared at him, and in their hearts, something deep shifted. Trust, once fragile, grew stronger. They had seen many turn away, but this man stood in front of them when danger came. The next day, the market buzzed with news. Everyone had heard of the confrontation. Some mocked Daniel as a fool. Others whispered that perhaps the widows were not cursed after all. A few began to respect him, though quietly. The widows walked into the workshop that morning with their heads held higher. They knew enemies remained, but they also knew they were not alone. Their children's laughter rang louder, filling the air with defiance against despair. Daniel watched them as they worked. He knew the storm was not over. The mob would return. Anger would rise. But he also knew something stronger had begun, an alliance built not on fear, but on courage. That night, as the widows rested, the oldest whispered, "We were almost destroyed, but he stood for us. Perhaps fate has given us more than just work. Perhaps fate has given us a shield." But in the alleys, the leader of the mob spoke again to his men. His eyes burned with hatred. "The human has humiliated us," he said. "Next time we will not leave so easily. Next time we will bring fire." The trial of fire had only just begun. The night after the attack was restless. The widows hardly slept. Every sound outside their shelter made them tense. Every whisper of wind felt like footsteps. Their children clung to them, too afraid to close their eyes. They had survived the mob, but they knew the danger had not ended. Daniel stayed awake too. He sat near his small fire, staring into the flames, replaying the night in his mind. The anger in the mob's eyes haunted him. He knew they would return, stronger, crueler. Yet he also knew that walking away was no longer possible. He had chosen his path, and he would not leave them to face the storm alone. The next morning, the marketplace felt different. People still whispered, but their whispers carried uncertainty. Now some looked at the widows with the same disgust as before, but others watched with quiet respect. The story of Daniel standing against the mob had spread, and stories had a way of planting seeds. The widows walked into the workshop, heads lifted higher than before. Their children followed, carrying small baskets with bread and cloth. They still feared the hatred around them, but they also felt something new, a strength that came from knowing they were no longer powerless. Daniel greeted them with a nod. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of what was coming. "Keep working," he told them. "Do not let fear break your stride. They want to see you fall, so let them see you rise instead." And rise they did, day after day. Their hands never stopped. The workshop grew cleaner, tools sharper, machines more organized. The master, who once only grunted at their presence, now gave small nods of approval, even muttered, "Efficient." Under his breath, but outside, trouble brewed. The men who had been pushed back burned with shame. The leader gathered them in secret, his voice filled with venom. "We cannot allow this. The human has made fools of us. If the widows remain, more will defy us. We must act." He lifted a torch and the others followed. That night, as the widows and their children slept, footsteps gathered outside. Flames lit the alley. The mob stood ready to burn, not just the widows' shelter, but their hope. But they were not alone this time. Daniel had not gone home. He had stayed near, watching, waiting. And when the mob stepped forward, he shouted loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Stop!" Doors opened, neighbors leaned out, curious eyes watching from every window. The mob froze, their torches flickering. Daniel walked forward, standing between the widows and the fire. His voice was steady. "If you burn their shelter, you burn your own honor. If you attack them, you attack me, and I will not let you pass." The leader sneered. "You think the crowd will protect you? They will not. They despise them as much as we do." But Daniel shook his head, his voice carried, reaching every ear in the street. "No, not everyone despises them. Some are afraid, yes. But fear does not mean truth. Look at them. They work, they feed their children, they harm no one, and what do? You try to destroy, to crush, to silence. Tell me, which of us is cursed?" A murmur rose among the watching crowd. Some nodded, others shifted uneasily. The mob leader's eyes widened, realizing the tide of opinion was turning. The fire in his torch seemed weaker under so many eyes. For a long, tense moment, the air hung heavy. Then, one by one, people began to step out of their homes. A merchant came forward, arms crossed. "He is right," he said. "They work harder than any of us. Why should they be punished?" Another voice joined. "They are mothers, they deserve a chance." The mob faltered, their torches lowering. The leader hissed in frustration, but he saw it. The crowd was no longer with him. To act now would mean turning the whole market against him. With a growl, he dropped his torch to the ground. "This is not finished," he muttered, retreating into the dark. His men followed, shadows slipping away. The widows stood trembling, tears streaming down their faces. Their children clung to them. Daniel turned and smiled faintly. "You are safe," he said. though his heart still pounded. The next day the market felt changed. People no longer whispered only curses. Some offered greetings, small nods. Even bread for the children. It was not everyone, but it was enough to show the tide had turned. The widows were no longer invisible, no longer only shadows of sorrow. They had become symbols of survival. The oldest widow said softly as she worked, "We were cast out, cursed, forgotten, but because of one human, we have been seen again." The middle widow added, "Because of one human, our children laugh again." The youngest whispered, holding her daughter close, "Because of one human, tomorrow is no longer dark." Daniel listened quietly, his chest filled with a warmth he could not describe. He had not sought glory, only justice. Yet now, he saw something greater. He saw how kindness could ripple, how one act could change many hearts. The widows no longer bowed their heads in shame. They walked through the streets with pride. They worked with strength. Their children played with joy. And though scars remained, hope had taken root as the sun set behind the market, casting golden light on the stones. Daniel stood with them, watching the children laugh. His voice was quiet but strong. "This is only the beginning," and so it was. For in a world where every door had once been closed, one had opened. And through that door walked not just three alien widows, but a story that would be remembered, a story of courage, of defiance, of humanity. A new dawn had come,